Topic of today's discussion would be Masters of the Universe Origins by Mattel, which is a take on the Masters of the Universe from the 80s, bringing them into the present day by releasing pretty much the same characters with some modifications when it comes to their articulation in particular, and some other differences when it comes to the sculpting as well. So what I have so far is about 5 figures from the Heroic Warriors, and I have about 3 from the Evil Warriors. So in this video I would like to cover the HeMan and his allies that you see in front of you. Each of these figures came packaged in very much the same style of packaging that was back in the 80s when the HeMan toys first came out. So here it is how it looks from behind, and this would be the card back of the HeMan figure. It has pretty much the same idea and same style of presentation like the vintage figures. It would have an art at the top, then drawing of the action features that the figure has, and then of course some of the other figures in the wave. So we have HeMan here, we have Tila, Man-at-Arms, and then some evil warriors such as Skeletor, Evelyn, and Beastman. And then if we take a look at the front here, again very strong vibe, retro vibe of the packaging, the way it looks, with the only exception of course stating that it's new for 2020. And the other catchphrase here would be modern posing, retro play. So the idea is of amalgamating the modern articulation and posing with the retro play. And of course here we have HeMan, the most powerful man in the universe. Along with the packaging, another feature that's part of the vintage line, and it was transferred into the Origins line, would be inclusion of mini comics. So in this case we have the title is Beast Barrage. So HeMan is surrounded by shadow beasts. Shadow beasts are the creatures that showed up originally in the Filmation cartoon series, and they were produced as figures in the Masters of the Universe Classics line. Now of course the artists are different compared to the ones from back in the 80s, but the idea is the same, to tell you a short story about the main characters and some of the supporting ones. So the idea again remains very much the same. It's only that the art has changed. And at the back, of course, again, a mini checklist of the Heroic Warriors and the Evil Warriors. Some of the other mini comics that were included, and there are some different ones, so they're not all the same title. We also have Double Trouble, HeMan holding 2 Orcos, which causes some confusion. And of course this is some of the other figures available in other waves. So we still have HeMan and Skeletor, but we have this time also Many Faces, Orko, Trapjaw, and Scareglow. And again, a short story. And then the last title of the ones that I have, actually my mini comic book, this particular one, for some unknown reason, and I believe it's due to the printing error, doesn't have any text inside, which is so weird. And then later on I discovered on the internet that this mini comic book actually does have a text to accompany the story, but for some unknown reason mine doesn't. So there is no bubble speeches anywhere. They're missing from the entire story. But I can pretty much figure out what's the story about anyway. Again, at the back we have a mini checklist. So again, regular HeMan and Skeletor, and this time we have Shira, the twin sister of HeMan. And we also have Roboto, Zodak, and Merman. And I'll also show you some of the cards of the Heroic Warriors. So over here we have Shira's card back. Here she is facing Hordak, who is also coming in the Masters of the Universe origin, and next to him is Mosquitor and Horde Troopers all around. So Mosquitor is another figure coming as well. There is no official image for him yet, but I understand he will be a deluxe figure when he comes out. And then, of course, the front of the card with a strong vintage vibe to it. And this time it says that it includes comic. And then the last card back, I will show you, would be that one of many faces. A heroic warrior who can change his faces. He has practically 3 faces that he can switch to a human, into a robot, and into a monster. And then again, some of the figures you get in this particular way. Well, let's get started then. We're going to talk about HeMan first. HeMan is pretty much looking the same as the vintage one would, with some differences, of course. The head sculpt is different, so it's not exactly identical to the vintage version of him, to the vintage counterpart, but I still think it looks alright. I mean, some people are not happy the way this head turned out, and the face in particular, but I think he looks alright. I don't expect this line to be highly detailed, not by any means, due to the fact that it's, I understand, meant and aimed at children and new generations to be introduced to HeMan. But of course, most of the time you see collectors such as myself aiming to try and get some of these. And mind you, they're not that simple to find in my neck of woods. There is quite a bit of a difficulty finding any of these. So, one major difference between the Origins HeMan and the vintage one would be the addition of articulation that the vintage one never had. And so what do I mean? Specifically, we have the articulation in the knees, so he can bend the leg, which the vintage one could not. And then we also have articulation in the boots, so they can turn around 360 degrees. And then there is articulation in the foot as well. Sorry, at the ankle area. So he can move foot backward, a bit forward, and there is a type of an ankle pivot right there. All of these movements did not exist in the vintage line at all. And he can do a split. I mean, obviously the vintage one could do also a bit of a split, but the main difference is that the vintage one had a sort of a rubber band connecting the legs inside the furry pants, but if that rubber band wears out, the legs would just pop out and you would have a hard time putting them back in. Now, I seem to understand that's not the case with the Origins one, so they have a better connection so that the legs don't just fall out once the rubber band rots out. So that's another big difference. Other than that, he comes pretty much with the same weapons as the vintage counterpart. There is a shield and an axe, and of course, the power sword, which looks pretty neat. I like the shape of it, and it looks very much accurate as to the early mini comics from back in the 80s. And I noticed it has 2 pegs right here, and you're probably wondering, so it looks like it's only half a sword. How come? Why is it not complete? Because in the classics they would kind of include half a sword and a complete sword, but I would say that this is again mimicking the idea of joining the 2 halves of a sword to create one complete sword, meaning the other one would be from Skeletor, just like it was the case with the vintage figures of HeMan and Skeletor. So I think this was done purposefully to make them look that way. He also has articulation in the wrist, and he can move hand back and forth and rotate it. There is articulation in the elbows, and then of course in the head too. Can turn the head left and right, and the arms can go sideways, which the vintage ones couldn't do. Oops, there goes the shield. Well, I might as well show you a close-up of the shield. The shield fits very well in the, although a little bit loosely, in his left arm. So that would be HeMan. Now the next one we're going to take a look at is Prince Adam. Prince Adam came with a vehicle in a bigger package. Now, of course, in my case, I wasn't able to get that package at all, so I only managed to get Prince Adam by himself, and he comes with a sword, a power sword in purple color, just like the vintage one. And as you can tell, he looks pretty much the same as the vintage one, so there is no change in the costume. The head is identical to that of HeMan, but with a slight color difference, I think. Because HeMan's hair looks more brighter yellow, and Adam's looks more like a mustard yellow. This is the sword he comes with, and this is a complete sword. Now, the bad part about this sword, which kind of annoyed me when I discovered it, is that the handle, as you can see the handle here, is too thick for him to hold, so it won't really stay firmly in his hand. It'll just fall off every time I try to put it on. And it doesn't matter if I put it in his left hand or the right hand, the sword just falls out. And I seem to understand, talking to other collectors, I'm not the only one. So as you can see, I'm trying to put it and he's barely holding it, and it's very loose. Other people have the same problem with this exact sword. So let's try this one. Yeah, as you can tell, it's just not gonna work. So what I did, I fiddled around with some of the vintage power swords and classics ones, so I realized both can fit in his hand, so I'll just show you at least with the vintage one. So yes, there we go, he can fit the sword pretty well and grasp onto it. Now, I'll show you the differences in looks between the vintage 80s, which is this blue one, and then of course the Origins one. You can tell that it's a pretty much almost exactly the same design, except the Origins one is a bit leaner in design and longer. And the only other thing that's not good about this sword, that it's missing a handle guard. It's not there, while the vintage one had that. Anyway, going back to the Prince Adam here, we have again same articulation, just like HeMan. The addition of the articulation on the arms and legs, and of course in the ankles too, and the feet. He is wearing his purple vest, sorry, a pink vest and the belt. Now there is only one difference, of course, with this, is that you could probably remove this whole, I understand you could remove his vest completely, and there is a connection here. I'll just try and show you. Yeah, you just unbuckle this area, it should come off. So it doesn't look like it's molded onto the body, so it does seem to be removable. I just don't like to remove it, I just like to keep it as it is. So I'll show you side by side how they look next to each other. There we go. HeMan and Prince Adam. So that would be as far as they go. Now I'll show you Many Faces, one of the heroic warriors. And unlike the other two, he actually does have his action feature intact. So he can switch the faces. So we have the monster face, the human face, and the robotic face. Same articulation as the other two. And one thing I forgot to mention, that there is movement in the waist. Now the only difference is that it's not spring loaded, so there is no power punch feature for it like it had in the vintage line. He comes with the exact same type of laser gun like the vintage one that did. And the looks of his appearance is pretty much exactly the same. So he looks pretty neat, and I think they nailed him. He looks really good. Now, the last one, or at least second to last, that I would like to show you is Shira, which was a surprise to me that they would release her so early, while they were still covering other characters. But I'm glad they did. Now, not by any means do I think it's a perfect figure. There is some things that I am not finding to be very good, but I'll show you in a minute. So this is Shira, I do not have the vintage one, so I cannot show you the comparison between the two. I do have the classics one though. So Shira comes with a couple of accessories. She comes with this crown, which I understand also was part of the vintage one and one of the classics versions. So she can wear it like so as well. So that just need a bit of effort to pin it on her head. There we go. And then there is opening for the eyes. And then she can wear it this way as well. She comes with a shield that has a jewel in it, and a yellow power sword that also has a jewel in it. She has a cape and a sculpted hair, and a belt that goes around her waist, and a cloth dress, or what seems to be a dress, and of course a cloth cape. She has some very ugly looking articulation, I must say so, over here at the knees, because as you can tell, it looks very unnatural and very weird, because it looks like the skin of the knees overlapping onto the bottom part of the leg, and I really find that annoying, the way it looks. Otherwise, she looks fine, except for this part. She also came with the mini comic book, which I believe I showed you earlier, and same type of articulation. She can do a split, a minor one, but I am assuming good enough if she's going to ride a horse, if they ever release him, the Swiftwind. Of course, articulation in the elbows and the wrists, and then articulation in the feet, except I don't think she has the ankle oh yes, she does actually. She does have an ankle pivot, and her costume looks similar to the Filmation one, not exactly the same, but it does resemble her vintage 80s counterpart. So that would be, Shira, the twin sister of HeMan. And as I said, I'm very glad that they released her. I wasn't expecting that for a while at least, but it was nice to know that they did put her in one of the first initial releases. Now the last one I would like to show you in this video would be Bottlecap. I have his packaging in the box, but I saved it somewhere on the side. It's just too big for me to show. Oops, there is a bit of a chaos here. Sorry about that, guys. The figures are toppling on top of each other. Alright, let's put them there for a moment. So yes, Bottlecap. Bottlecap looks exactly the same as the vintage one. Comes with the removable mask. Has articulation that obviously the vintage one doesn't, so he can close and open his jaw. The head moves left to right, up and down. And the legs have articulation, which is an improvement, but not in the paws, unfortunately, but in the knees. So he can bend in the knees, and you can turn his legs at the knees 360 degrees. There is also articulation in the tail. Can move up and down, left and right, so 360 degrees. The saddle is removable. And the mask, and especially the painted eyes, which the vintage one didn't have. So he looks very much, the way the mask is painted, especially the eyes, resembles the Filmation Bottlecap, the way he looked in the Filmation cartoon series. Now the mask itself can be a little bit too loose, in my opinion, for him to have. It can kind of easily fall off. But if you find exact way of putting it, or just fiddle around with it, then it should hopefully work without coming off easily. And the last thing I want to show you regarding Bottlecap here, by the way, he didn't come with any mini comics. He's one of the figures that doesn't come with any, or anything else in regards to any posters or anything like that. I'm going to show you how he looks together with HeMan. So let's just pose them together, like so. I'm gonna just quickly return Shira's tiara, crown tiara thing, because she lost it there. And there we go. All right, let's take a quick look. So that's HeMan on Bottlecap. I think he looks pretty neat, and I would highly recommend this Bottlecap for anybody who might be wondering would it be good for the Classics HeMan, because the Classics Bottlecap is going for way too much money these days. So I would recommend this particular Bottlecap for those of you guys who couldn't get the Classics one, because the Classic HeMan can fit pretty well on this type of Bottlecap. So this would be a cheaper alternative. So there we go, and whoops, and I'm going to quickly show you how he looks from the front as well. So there we go. They look pretty good together. So there we go, that would be the Bottlecap and HeMan. I'm gonna put Bottlecap aside. So that's all I have to show you guys today. At this point in time. In the next video, I'm hoping to show you the few of the evil warriors I have, and specifically the ones I have would be Skeletor, Trapjaw, and Panther. So the Panther is also available at this time. So that's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time with another new video. Thank you. Bye.